July the 21st, 2007. We're meeting here together to take a bite out of this New World Order. And I think our best shot at it is to make sure we're in touch with God. And I like to start each program off with prayer. And I'm asking you to join me in prayer for those who are taking a stand against the New World Order. Please, don't just listen to me pray. Add your voice so that a multitude is praying together rather than one person praying and a multitude listening. Let us pray. Dear Yahweh, God of good, creator of all the universe, God of Abraham and his sons, Ishmael and Isaac, our Heavenly Father, we thank you for the many blessings. We ask that you shelter us from the forces of evil. Bless our minds with discernment and our voices with your words. Guide our steps that we may follow your way. Cause the New World Order to fail and its conspirators to be exposed and defeated. Give us courage, health, determination, and material resources. Keep us in the hollow of your hand, enshrouded in your Holy Spirit. For we pray in the name of your only begotten Son, Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Messiah. Amen. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we can see that this New World Order is gaining strength and power. They've gotten it down to where they control the newspapers, the televisions, almost all the radio stations. They've got the governments under their control. They are the captains of industry. They have the entire business world almost totally subjugated to their whim and will. And they plan on tightening our noose, shortening our leash. And I remind people frequently that America is only going to be the land of the free as long as it is the home of the brave. When we are too afraid to speak out against our public servants, when we are afraid that that might rock the boat, get us on a list, I would say we've come a long way from our forefathers who had the intestinal fortitude to throw a king off our backs and create a constitutionally limited government that was intended not only for themselves but their posterity. And that's us. We've got every right in the world to be free. God ordained it for us. Our founding fathers established it for us. Documentation was put down that, yes, was meant for us. And then, I think it was November 5th, 2005, our President of the United States, George W. Bush, said right in the White House, the Constitution is nothing but a goddamned piece of paper. Now, I don't know how you look at it, but I think that's treason. It's more than just a piece of paper. There's writing on it. That writing is in the English language, and it composes the supreme law of this land. And as long as he thinks that piece of paper is nothing, he's going to abuse it. We've got a break coming up here. We're going to be right back. Please stay tuned. And listen carefully to our sponsors. We need to support them so that they can continue to support us. I hope that music means that we're back from the break and we're ready to roll again. We were talking about our Constitution and the way our president thought that it was nothing but a piece of paper. And I'm really kind of concerned that we don't take that seriously enough, because we need to see what our forefathers felt about this issue. And there's an excerpt from the Declaration of Independence that really does point out this very clearly. Let me read that little section of the Declaration of Independence because it's important. It says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same objective, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security." Now that part is so true that they point out that mankind is disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable. And we've gotten to the point that it's long past the time when we should speak up and say something about it, to do something about it. Because, quite frankly, these evils are beyond being sufferable. And it's only because we don't know most of what's going on. We're left in the dark because the newspapers and the television hide so much from us. They act as propaganda mills for the insiders. And we have, going back to that piece of the Declaration of Independence, that ends up by saying that when a long train of abuses and usurpation, pursuing invariably the same objective, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is not only their right, it is their duty to throw off such government. And I wonder, if we were to overthrow the feds and go back to the Constitution, would that be a revolution? I'm sure that we would be accused of that in the process, and even if we were to be successful, I think all the way to the bitter end, they would deny that we were anything but wild and crazy people, terrorists. We've seen in the past how much they have trained their guns of television onto people who speak out against the corruption. Sometimes they try to ignore them for a while, but if they persist, infamy prevails and they vilify people with the kind of libel and slander designed to reduce those who dare to speak out to the level of idiots who should not be listened to at all. And quite frankly, you can see from what happens on the television with some frequency, someone is called a conspiracy theorist. Sometimes they're even worse. They call them a conspiracy nut. And whether it was theorist or nut, the disgust and the contempt in the voice of the speaker on television conveys that these are the lowest of low-life people and should be disregarded with vigor, ignored with a fervor. Unless, of course, you wish to shout them down. And we hear Bush talking about those conspiracy theories, but the one thing they never do, never, ever, ever do, is talk about what is that theory. And if you stop and think about it, what is a conspiracy but two or more people planning in secret to do something wrong? And so those who theorize that there is a conspiracy in existence have to be right, because by that definition there has to be thousands, millions, because there's a lot of people out there working with other people to do wrong. But what they're trying hard not to talk about is the great conspiracy. The one where evil people, satanic in nature, pretending to be Jews, have worked together to literally bring the whole world under subjugation and under their power, to reduce us to penury and serfdom. And as long as we're timid, they're going to continue to encroach upon our rights. As long as we're afraid to stand up, freedom is in danger. Because again and again, I must say, this is only going to be the land of the free as long as it's the home of the brave. And if you're too afraid to talk to your friends and your family about these issues because they might call you a nut, you're too afraid to save your freedom. You're too afraid to save your Constitution. And if you don't have freedom to pass on to your children, they won't have it to pass on to your grandchildren, their children. So I must say again and again and again, freedom isn't free, and part of it is standing up and talking to those that you know need to hear about it. Now, part and parcel of the reason that you have trouble telling your friends and your family about what's going on, you get ridiculed them, it's because you want to tell them too much at once. You want to hit everything, and when you do, it's like packing things so tightly that there's no breathing. But if you're willing to take your time and slowly talk about things, especially if you've got some backup, newspaper articles, they talk about these things from time to time in the newspapers. They give you hints of what's going on. I have newspaper articles about, right after 9/11. It's got a big headline on it that says, America. Welcome back. We were talking about that portion of the Declaration of Independence that said it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and institute safeguards for their security. And we see that there are several options here, boxes for us to fit in. There is the ballot box. And I think with the voting machines in the hands of the insiders, that has some limitations in its effectiveness. I honestly believe that the fix is in for Hillary. According to the Forward, which is a newspaper of the Jews, for the Jews, and by the Jews, it says that the preponderance of AIPAC money is earmarked for Hillary. Now, AIPAC is the American Israeli Political Action Committee. And when you can't use the ballot box, that leaves only two others. That's the jury box and the cartridge box. Now, the Founding Fathers regarded that right of trial by jury as the last and best protection against political oppression. And I agree with them. And that's why I think we should never try to get off of jury duty. You could be the one up there when the judge keeps sending the jury out because he doesn't want the jury to hear all the facts. You know what to do. You don't just listen to his summary judgment that you should find somebody guilty because he tells you to. You want to hear the proof. Now, the Founding Fathers were right. That is the best protection against political oppression. And tyrants could not impose unjust laws on free people as long as a right to a jury trial keeps those bureaucrats in check. Any one juror can prevent conviction and thereby nullify bad laws and temper facts with a merciful understanding of motives and circumstances to preserve the spirit over the letter of the law. In the February term of 1794, Supreme Court Justice John Jay instructed the very first jurors, quote, "It is presumed that juries are the best judges of the fact. It is, on the other hand, presumed that courts are the best judges of law, but still, both objects are within your power of decision. You have the right to take upon yourselves to judge both and determine the law as well as the facts in controversy." Now, if you mention that in courts today, the judges would be so angry that they'd probably throw you right in jail with no trial. You know, that's against the law. But they do it. And they do it with some regularity. It was our second president, John Adams, that said of jurors, "It is not only his right but his duty to find the verdict according to his own best understanding, judgment, and conscience, though in direct opposition to the direction of the court." It was Supreme Court Justice Samuel Chase. He was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. And in his 1804 decree, he stated, quote, "The jury has the right to judge both the law as well as the facts." America has strayed far away from this check against governmental tyranny. Now, judges routinely tell the jurors that they are to judge only the facts that the court will permit into evidence according to the law as the judge interpreted it. And too often jurors end up apologizing in tears to the defendant for the verdict, but rationalize that they had no choice because that's what the judge had directed. Too many jurors believe they must rubber stamp the court's decisions. If they realize that they are the true judges, then justice would be served more often. If a juror accepts as law that which the judge states, then the juror has accepted the exercise of absolute authority of a government employee and has surrendered a power and right that was once a safeguard of liberty. That was from Eliot's Debates in the Bancroft History of the Constitution, page 268, written in 1788. jurors' rights and duties become eroded over time, starting in the mid-1800s. Northern jurors consistently refused to convict abolitionists who had violated the 1850 fugitive slave law. So the judges began questioning jurors to find out if they were prejudiced against the government's position. Back then, the bureaucrats condemned jurors for undermining the rule of law and the uniformity of justice. Most of us today would praise the jury nullification verdicts for helping the cause of anti-slavery. In 1895, the Supreme Court bowed to pressure from large corporations and ruled that jurors need not be informed.
You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, because you can handle the truth.
Welcome back. We're talking about the juries. And it was in 1895 that the Supreme Court bowed to pressure from large corporations and ruled that jurors need not be informed that they could veto an unjust law. This bitter split decision aided robber barons who had difficulty in pressing labor leaders who defied them and the anti-striking laws. Juries also ruled against the big corporations in damage suits, which prompted members of the American Bar Association to fear that jurors had become hostile to their clients and too sympathetic to the poor. Few juries vetoed laws after the courts began concealing the truth from the jurors by falsely instructing them that they may consider only the facts as admitted by the court. It became a trial by government. And if the jury have no right to judge the justice of a law of the government, they cannot protect the people against government oppression, for there is no oppression that government may not authorize by the color of law. And if the courts and indirectly government can decide what evidence a jury shall have before them to decide a verdict, then by controlling the evidence, they can effectively control the verdict. Only the knowledge of jurors' power have been suppressed, not the power itself. And as recently as 1972, in the case of U.S. versus Doherty, the court stated the jury has an unreviewable and unreversible power to acquit in disregard of the instructions on the law given by the trial judge. The fact that there is a widespread existence of the jury's prerogative and approval of its existence as a necessary counter to case-hardened judges and arbitrary prosecutors does not establish as an imperative that the jury must be informed by the judge of that power. See, the logic behind that decision is that Americans should know that they are sovereign. And in a constitutionally limited republic, the people have granted government certain limited powers and retained the rest for themselves. And if the peoples are the masters of public servants, they should know it is not up to the servants to inform the masters of those rights. Daniel Webster was accurate when he admonished people to preserve the Constitution, for miracles do not cluster. There's only one government in all of history instituted for the sanctity of the individual, and that is our American Republic. And if the Bill of Rights is lost, freedom may not rise again for a long time. Those rights may wither if the masses continue to believe that freedom is free. It is not. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance, and one of the best chances to safeguard those rights is when you are sitting on a jury armed with the knowledge of the power at your disposal. These rights came about at great personal sacrifice for many people. Trial by a jury of peers was instituted when brave men caught dictator King John in the meadow of Runnymede England over 800 years ago. And on June 15th, 1215, those heroes gave the chance to put his signature, his blood, on the Magna Carta. The king reluctantly signed, and that commenced the right of the people to be tried by their peers instead of a governmental employ. And it was a great victory for justice and the underpinning of common law, which resulted in our Constitution. Despots and would-be dictators are never satisfied with justice. They want power. Within 400 years, it was commonplace for the British Empire for jurors to be fined or imprisoned for not obeying the court's directive to bring in a specified verdict. One celebrated case is the 1670 trial of William Penn, who dared to worship God in his own Christian way rather than follow the king's mandated religion. 4 jurors refused to follow the judge's directive and voted not guilty. They spent 9 weeks in jail without sanitary conditions or a reasonable amount of food and water. They knew in their hearts that if no person was harmed, there really was no crime. And so these heroes saved William Penn from execution. And he went on to become the driving force behind the Liberty Bell, Independence Hall, the city of Philadelphia, the state of Pennsylvania, because good men defied the courts and voted their conscience. If Americans will learn about their rights, they may be able to save them, for we have only those rights that we understand. Those behind the drive for a new world order want us to believe we have none. And if we're less than vigilant, they will see to it that we have none. Common law juries are a safeguard against such tyranny, but we must be knowledgeable to be effective. We must also keep our understanding a secret from the courts when jury screening is in process, because government wants only jurors who will do like they're told. Knowledgeable people are routinely dismissed. Only jurors are above the law. Their existence is not to rubber stamp the government's wishes. They are instituted to safeguard justice, despite the government. Jurors are the real judges. Don't let some bureaucrat convince you otherwise. Never try to be excused from jury duty. There is nothing civil you will ever do that is more important than safeguarding liberty. Be there. Be informed. And act according to your conscience. Just like justice depends on it. Because it does. When the ballot box fails, and the jury box fails, and we see the soapbox encroached upon, that is, that First Amendment, that freedom of speech curtailed, and it's never, ever out and out outlawed. Freedom of speech is punished with something else. If you find that you're speaking out and you get a lot of tickets and IRS investigates you and hassles you, then you understand where you stand. And none of us really wants to have to resort to the cartridge box. But the Founding Fathers wanted to make sure it was there in case you needed it. They made it very clear that it wasn't there for us to go hunting. Although you could surely use them for that. And it wasn't there specifically so that you could defend yourself from burglars or muggers. Although that was surely a good application for having a peace. But the mainstay, the reason it was put there was so that you could take an armed stand against tyrannical government if they moved on your liberties. Are we really and truly the descendants of people who threw a king off our back? And if we are, how can we be afraid of our public servants? They act a whole lot like masters, and there's no doubt about it. Public masters. You know, the Gestapo walks that thin blue line between tyranny and treason. I've got another name for the blue wall, or the blue curtain, as some people call it. I call it conspiracy to obstruct justice. It doesn't matter who commits crimes. It doesn't matter who steps on your rights. It's wrong. And even if they are government officials with badges and uniforms, they should be taken to task and brought in line. How on earth did our public servants become masters? I say it was slowly and gradually, an encroachment like the communist Czechoslovakia. Quite frankly, I know too much not to be a conspiracy theorist. And I have to say, if you're afraid of your public servants, you're not really free. That Second Amendment is really important. Thomas Jefferson said, if you ever see it being encroached upon, move to safeguard it, for it's a sure sign that all your rights and freedoms are about to be taken. Remember, the Founding Fathers gave us that second to fight tyranny, a lot more than hunting or personal defense. And I think about the hurricane down there in Louisiana, the one that blew through New Orleans, the one called Katrina. And I say again, the shame of Katrina is that Americans allowed our military to go door and door and disarm people. Oh, they were allowed to stay in their homes, but they weren't allowed the protection they needed to keep the roaming mobs away from them. War is when the government decides who are our enemies. Revolution is when we do. And I wondered, would they call it a revolution if we overthrew the feds and went back to that Constitution? Just how do our public servants license our rights and sell them to us? That part I read about from the Declaration of Independence, where it talked about our rights and our duties to safeguard our Constitution, is most important because it's all that keeps government off our backs. And as it slips away, they're becoming more oppressive. And I would really like for them to legalize freedom. Because as it stands right now, we're free to do like we're told. What kind of people are we? Do we have the courage to be free, to stay free? Or don't we? What are you doing for freedom? Do you support Republic Radio? Do you support Ron Paul? Are you doing anything to wake up your friends and family? Because as embarrassing it is to be called a nut, it's going to be more embarrassing when they come to you afterwards and say, you know, what you were saying turns out to be true. I should have listened to you and put some food away. You do have some for me, don't you? And if you don't have enough to go around, you better talk to them again so that they can start getting ready themselves. You know, wheat is kind of cheap right now. Farmers can't make enough off of their wheat to stay alive. When you go to buy a box of cereal from the grocery store, about 10 cents in there is for the farmer. The rest is manufacturing and marketing. We have to be aware of what's going on here. We have to make preparations for tough times ahead because the plan is sinister. And as it shapes up, it sure looks like the time of Jacob's trouble, the Great Tribulation. And as we see the evidence of the signs of the times of the end, we know definitively that this is the times when there are wars and rumors of war. I tell you, one of the rumors of war, the rumor is that we're already in Iran. And the Mossad has some of their people already in Iran. And of course they would deny it, just like when they were in the Vietnam War, they would deny that they were ever in Cambodia and Laos. But they were. It turns out that that rumor was true. Now, they don't come right out and say, oh, yeah, the government lied, we were in Cambodia and Laos. All they did was change the name of the war from Vietnam War to the Southeast Asia War so that they didn't have to really do a lot of explaining. And we have here a lie of omission. I say again and again, what kind of people are we? It takes courage to be free. And if we don't, our children will curse us in our graves. What's coming is so horrendous, so ugly. That it's hard to imagine. Our Bible tells us it's going to be the worst time that ever was or ever will be. And I suspect that some of what we got coming here is because of mankind's own attitude. Man has with some regularity rejected God Almighty. He has faith in science. He has faith in television. He has faith in his political party. These are such misplaced faith. you'll find the flesh right off and underneath the I think I faintly hear some bumper. Getting back to those wars and rumors of wars, American boys were sent over to Vietnam under the pretext of stopping communism from coming to America. Now, they should have been sent to the boardrooms of the largest corporations to really be effective. See, communism was really instituted by these Ashkenazim or false Jews that ensued from the Khazar warriors. And we find that Karl Marx's real name was Kissel Moses Mordecai Levy. And there were hidden such names behind the rest of the people in that Bolshevik revolution. And they were the ones that were behind Ho Chi Minh and the Communist Front up there. And at that time, they were the good guys and we were the bad guys. See, at the outset of that Vietnamese war, the Vietnamese had mostly primitive weapons like bows, arrows, and spears. And some of us believe that the Vietnamese would not have been able to reach America's coast. The war was really a struggle over the opium fields. And that struggle, as I said before, was not confined to Vietnam, but more than spilled over into neighboring countries. And the magnitude of war was as great in Cambodia and Laos as it was in Vietnam. And how could government conduct secret wars in Cambodia, Laos, China, Indonesia, El Salvador, Angola, Chile, Peru, Panama, etc., without conspiratorial suppression of newspapers and TV coverage? Someone would certainly have mentioned their involvement in such a secret war to those scoop-eager reporters. The power to stop a story must of necessity have been higher up in the organizational structure. At the time, any mention of such an unthinkable atrocity would have been ridiculed. Citizens of the United States of America are supposed to be free people. U.S. government was formed for the sole purpose of protecting the unalienable rights bestowed upon people by God. And how could such a government usurp its chartered responsibility and engage in secret wars? The 10th Amendment in the Bill of Rights forbids much of this corruption. Such operations are classified secret for security purposes. Is it truly for the security of the nation that free people are kept in the dark about their government's involvement in such wars? The 10th Amendment forbids much of this. Is it truly for the security of the nation that free people were kept in the dark? Or was it for the security of the politicians who know that they're doing wrong and want to retain and abuse power? We got a break. We'll be right back. Hey. Welcome back. This is Jack Otto, your host for Radically Right. Like that Korean conflict, Vietnam was a UN operation. And like all UNO military maneuvers, these were run by the Undersecretary General for Political and Security Affairs. Now, a communist tentacle of the conspiracy always holds that position. These communists act like communists even when they are directing American boys into war. Other secret wars continue in South America and Asia without mention in either the newspapers or television, and some wars, such as the one in Korea, seem to have skirmishes erupt periodically. But the one war which seems to get very little coverage is the war against individual rights. Government seems to fold, spindle, and mutilate us with increasing frequency and severity. There are so many laws in the book now, even the most sophisticated law firms cannot grasp the fullness of it. Yet, there are swarms of bureaucrats who microscopically examine us expressly for the purpose of raising revenue for the government through fines for infraction of law. And the double standard is blatant. When government owes you, it uses such excuses as being too busy or not having the budget. But should you fail to comply fully, they disallow such excuses and levy additional fines and penalties. Are we free people, or are we puppets guided by the strings of an opinion-molding media? We have rights only if we're intelligent enough to know about them and bold enough to secure them. Those rights you do not know about, you don't have. And part and parcel of the reason for that is it requires that you make a good faith objection when somebody is stepping on your rights. If you don't object, that's construed as consent. The conspiracy is old. It goes way back. And there was a Sir William Pitt that spoke before the House of Lords in Britain in 1770. And he declared, "There is something behind the throne greater than the king himself." This gave rise to the expression, power behind the throne. And it was Henry Edward Manning, the Archbishop of Westminster, who wrote on communism and stated, "The work of secret political societies from 1789 to this day have been perfecting their formation." He elaborated on that conspiracy. He said, "Is now a power in the midst of Christian and civilized world pledged to the destruction of Christianity and the old civilization of Europe." And I got to tell you, if you only knew, it was dedicated to our destruction too. Then there was a respected scholar, one Abby Joseph Lane, who wrote that he discovered a plan to disorganize at one blow Christian society and the belief and customs of the Jews, and then bring about a state of things where, religiously speaking, there will be neither Christian or Jew. And here we're talking about the real Jews. It's the real Jews they plan on destroying, just like the Aryan people are slated for precisely that. President of Harvard University, David Papin, delivered a strong warning about the Illuminati to the graduating class of 1798. It was on July 19th of that year. Timothy Dwight, the president of Yale, followed suit. And then there was Benjamin Disraeli, the British Prime Minister, who wrote in 1844 that the world is governed by very different personages from what is imagined by those who are not behind the scenes. Now, he only hinted at it because Disraeli was one of them. And so was Felix Frankfurter. He was Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court and a protege of the arch-Zionist Louis Brandeis. And he said the same thing about politics here in America when he said, the real rulers in Washington are invisible and exercise power from behind the scenes. He was right. He was one of them. And according to the New Standard Jewish Encyclopedia, Felix Frankfurter was one of the founding fathers of the ACLU, which is closely affiliated with the communist movement in America. And most of its efforts are expended in supporting that movement. Not just because they have told us in the newspapers and on the television that communism is dead. Don't believe it. Mikhail Gorbachev wrote a book about it, the new perestroika, the glasnost. And in his book, he had two forward sections to it, one for the East and one for the West, and he pissed up to us in the West, but he told the folks in the East they haven't changed their mind one little bit. They're on their course, and they're going to run us, and they're going to take it. We got a break coming up here. We're going to be right back in just a few minutes. Please stay tuned. Welcome back. This is Jack Otto, your host for this edition of Radically Right. And I want to talk about one more of those cautions against the conspiracy. And this one was made by the mayor of New York City, one John Hyland, who said in 1922 in a speech on March 26th, and he said, the real menace of our republic is the invisible government, which like a giant octopus sprawls its slimy length over our city, state, and nation. At the head is a small group of banking houses, generally referred to as the international bankers. This little coterie of powerful international bankers virtually runs our government for their own selfish ends. We also heard in the Iran-Contra thing where Ollie North talked about the invisible government, the parallel government, the shadow government. And I want you to notice, when you think back on it, why did nobody say to Ollie North, well, if you're part of this invisible shadow government, are you guys up to doing anything besides running guns and drugs? But they didn't ask. They didn't care. They already knew what it was up to, and they just went into their containment mode. I say we do have to be ready, and I don't think that we're going to get everybody together to do anything, as long as we don't have the television and the newspapers at our disposal. So as long as we can't coordinate a concerted effort, as long as it's going to be individual efforts, I think a person needs to be out in the country, going for self-sufficient living, making himself a little hideaway. In fact, I'm retiring from the school system where I've been helping to teach high school kids how to build a house. And I'm thinking about going into underground structures and building houses that are already bomb shelters or bunkers or whatever you want to call them. They are specifically disgusted by Christians. And I understand they have a special angst and animosity for those that keep the Ten Commandments, specifically that fourth commandment about remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. And they plan on obliterating us, literally. Now they're going to do it with a number of ways. They've already been working on it, but they have two-stage poisons, and they have the chemtrails, and they have all these concocted diseases that they're bringing together, like AIDS, which was invented in the biological laboratories at Fort Detrick, Maryland. I think it was Building 550 that it was put together and loaded into millions of doses of vaccine, 5 million doses, and distributed in several areas of Africa by the World Health Organization. Now, for the most part, people don't know about that. It was all over the front page of the London Times in 81, but never made it to our television or our newspapers here. They just made us believe that it was some monkey bit somebody. You know, these notions of conspiracy are brought out in history, but we just don't remember it. And if we don't have them at hand, you can't bring them to your friends and family so that they understand. There was a British Chancellor of the Exchequer who said yestercentury. His name was Reginald McKenna, and he said the banks can and do create money, and they who control the credit of a nation direct the policy of governments and hold in the hollow of their hands the destiny of the people. The conspiracy is known by many names. Many front organizations act like tentacles. And I'm going to read you off a few of them. The ACLU. Now, they like to tell us that's the American Civil Liberties Union, but I think it's the American Communist Lawyers Union. There's Alpha Banking. And the Alumbrados, which changed its name to the Jesuits. The Anti-Defamation League. The Apostles Club. The Aspen Institute. The Atlantic Conference. Avion. Baha'i. Bilderberger Society. B'nai B'rith. B'nai Moshe. The Bohemian Club. Book and Snake. Brookings Institute. Brother Artists. Brotherhood of Death. Brotherhood of the Dragon. Brotherhood of the Snake. Bund. Business Council. Carbonari. Chapter 322. Club of Rome. Cosmos Club. Council of 9. Council of 13, that's the Grand Druids. The Cosmos Club. Council on Foreign Relations. Dartmouth Conference. Eastern Liberal Establishment. Hermolasity. Esselina Institute. Fabian Society. File and Claw. Foreign Policy Association. Freemasons. Gardnerian Brotherhood. Golden Dawn. Grand Alpha Lodge. Grand Orient Lodges. Great White Brotherhood. Green Dragon. Green Glove. Garanay. Hadassah. Haskalah. Hellfire Club. Hermetic Brotherhood of Light. Hidden Church of the Holy Grail. The Hudson Institute. The Illuminati. Jason Group. Jason Society. Jesuits. Knights Templar. Knights Kadash. Knights of the Lambda. Knights Malta. Latin. The Left Hand. Lodge of Cadus, Lucas Trust, Majestic 12, and I'll read the last half of them on the other side of this break. Please stay tuned. We're going to be right back. Back for the closing segment of the program. And I wanted to remind you again that freedom isn't free, and I want you to send some support of some kind to the Republic Broadcasting Organization. We're about to go off the air here for tonight. Let me go off mentioning these front organizations for the insiders. Things like Lucas Trust, Majestic 12, Moriah, the Martinists, the Masons, the Moravian Brotherhood, the Mothers of Darkness, the National Council of Churches, National Endowment for Arts, National Endowment for Humanities, the Networking Institute, the Nihilists, the New World Order, the New York Kahila, the Olympians, Opus Dei, Order of the Garter, or Order of the Helmet, Order of Omega, Order of One, Order of Osiris, Order of St. John Jerusalem, Order of the Quest, Order of the Rose, and the Rose is George Bush Sr., Order of the Silver Star, Order of the Temple of the East, Order Templi Orientis, Order of Zion, Peace University, Pilgrim Society, Prior de Zion, Rand Institute, Rosh Hashanah, Royal Institute for International Affairs, Russell Trust, Sanhedrin, Set Baha'i, the Scroll and Key, that's the Harvard version of Skull and Bones, Secret Brotherhood, Shin Bet, Society of Cincinnati, Society of the Throng, Sons of Mars, Souls Club, Strict Observance, Swedenborg, Temple of Power, The Order, Theosophics, Union of Concerned Scientists, Roundtable, Trilateral Commission, The Wolf's Head, World Assembly of Religion, World Congress of Churches, World Goodwill, World Parliament of Religion, World Zionist Organization, and the Communist Party. Wait a minute. The newspapers and television have declared the communist threat dissolved, then it must be right. No, wrong. The same KGB agents that raped Afghanistan under the USSR are high up in charge of their New World Order, and China never even pretended to denounce communism. But we're so quick to lick up that spittle because we want to believe it. And if it gets the conspirators what they want, they will tell us what we want to hear, and they've got the media to do it. It was communist leader Nikolai Lenin, whose real name was Ulanov, and he said that the greatest mistake certainly would think that concessions mean peace. Nothing of the kind. Concessions are nothing but a new form of war. Well, we're closing out for the day. I want to thank you folks for joining us. I want to ask God bless you and watch over you. May Yahweh be with you.